Welcome, everybody, to Survive in Advance on the Grizzly Crew Sports Network. Survive in Advance is brought to you by MyBookie.ag. For a 50% cash bonus up to $1,000, make sure you go to thegrizzlytruth.net, click on the MyBookie.ag banner at the top of the page. That'll take you there. I am your co-host for Survive in Advance, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I'd like to welcome in my co-host, 1981 national champion, Steve Risley. How you doing, Steve?
Hey, you're doing great this morning, Mike. Fun weekend of basketball.
And, of course, our guest on Mondays, especially this time of the year, from Fansided and Busting Brackets. Help me welcome to the show a man who probably missed a pick in Northeastern over Kansas as bad as anybody has ever missed it. Help me welcome Brian Rauf to the show. How you doing, Brian?
I missed a lot of those first yard games. I was expecting more of those kind of upsets, but that just hasn't happened.
All right, so let's go ahead. Let's start off with Duke UCF. Is this just an anomaly because UCF's got a 7'6" guy to clog things up? Or did we find a way, which I think everybody thought all year was there anyways, by just letting Trey Jones shoot threes and putting extra guys on Zion Williamson?
Yeah, I think that's the big takeaway for other teams is that kind of junk defense that UCF played, particularly in the second half where they essentially had Taco Fall guarding Trey Jones, but he was essentially just hanging it out in the paint, letting Trey Jones shoot open threes that Trey Jones couldn't make. I think he ended up 1 for 8 from 3 on the day. I think we'll see teams moving forward try to emulate that kind of strategy to kind of add an extra player to the paint for some added rim protection. At the same time, no one else has a Taco Fall, a 7'6" guy or well over 7-foot guy who can impact the way Zion Williamson and R.J. Barrett, Cam Reddish, and everybody else attack the rim. We know that that's where Duke's bread and butter is made this year, and even though Taco Fall, I think, only had 3 blocks in that game, altered a whole ton of shots and really deterred guys from driving and attacking the basket the same way they normally do. And during that second half, that made Duke pretty ineffective. And now it's an effective strategy when you have somebody like Fall down there to impact that, and everybody has that. So that part can't be emulated. And I think we'll see Duke kind of get back to being the Duke team we thought they were the next couple rounds here. But I would expect them to see a lot more of those junk defenses where essentially they leave Trey Jones, Jordan Goldwire, players like that unguarded.
Yeah, but teams that can't shoot the ball. The thing that stands out to me, 1987, UNLV was the number 1 seed in the tournament, and they played Indiana. And they had a guard, I think his name was Mark Wade, that played for UNLV. And IU didn't even guard him because they put the extra guy, whether it was Steve Isle or whoever it was, down to double-team Armin Gilliam. Wade wouldn't even shoot the ball. And in the end, the extra bodies makes a huge difference. So I think unless Trey Jones can make some shots, I think this is going to be hard for them to win.
It will be interesting. I think kind of the thing that's lost in all that is the fact that Duke actually shot the ball pretty well from the perimeter outside of Trey Jones. I think they made 10 threes in that game, shot 40%. Zion, RJ, and Cam all made multiple threes. I think Cam and Zion both made 3 in that game, which in any other scenario is a positive sign for this Duke team moving forward, considering the level at which they struggled to shoot the 3 this year. The problem was Trey Jones in that 1 for 8, and the fact that UCF was essentially daring him to shoot open shots.
All right, Steve, you have any questions? Or
No, not really. I think this is just a case where I think 2 things happened here yesterday. First, it was a great basketball game. It certainly was fun to watch. I think to some degree UCF came into this thinking we've got nothing to lose. Let's go lay it out on the line. We're the underdogs. We're supposed to get wiped out here. And I don't know if maybe Duke didn't kind of, and I hate to say this because they're so well coached, maybe didn't overlook this game a little bit, just a slight bit. Just kind of like thinking, okay, we're going to get through UCF. We're going to have to face Liberty or Virginia Tech in the next game. I don't know. I don't know that because I wasn't in the locker room, but that's kind of what it tastes like to me. But I think, champions find a way. And I think as long as Zion Williamson continues to play like he's playing, I still think Duke's going to be very hard to beat because I just don't think there's anybody that can stop him from scoring when he wants to score.
Yeah, but I would think the key to beating them would be let him score as many points as he wants. It's kind of like the Houston Rockets. I mean, if James Harden scores 60, they have a hard time winning. If he scores 30 and everybody else gets involved, it's more difficult. Now, when we look at the regional semifinal, Duke will play Virginia Tech. And when I looked at this bracket coming in, I had Duke going to the Final Four. But to me, this game, I think, is a very dangerous game for them, Brian. Virginia Tech knows how they play. They've beaten them before. They're not going to be intimidated by them. And from watching Virginia Tech's really good defensively also.
They are. I think in that game against Liberty yesterday, they only allowed, I think, Liberty to score 6 baskets in the second half, and one of them was in the closing seconds when it didn't really matter. That's exceptional.
Wait a second, Brian, the line was 9.5 points, and I took Liberty, and they lost by 9. Every shot mattered.
in that respect, yes.
Okay. Yes. I just wanted to get that straight. I mean, it did matter to some people.
But holding a team to 6 made field goals and a half is outstanding, especially when you consider the fact as well that Virginia Tech ranks in the top 10 in the country in three-point shooting. So when you have a quality defense and a team that can make threes at a really high clip, you're poised to be able to pull some upsets in some of these games. And in that win over Duke did not have Zion Williamson, but Virginia Tech didn't have their best player in Justin Robinson either. So I think this is still going to be a closer game than a lot of people think it's going to be.
All right, Steve, what do you think about a shot for a Virginia Tech upset here?
I'm not going to bet against Duke until Duke gets beat. I just think they're too strong. They've got too many weaponry. They've got arguably the best basketball coach in college basketball right now, and I think they have an intimidation factor about them. The fact that they are Duke. I like Virginia Tech a lot. I watched some of that game yesterday, and they're strong. But like I said, I go back to the same phrase: champions find a way. I think Duke's a champion this year.
All right. I thought you said it was going to be Villanova, Steve.
Yeah, I know. I thought Villanova would beat State. I thought Villanova would beat Purdue, but I didn't go beyond that far. So.
Yes, you did.
I was wrong
You picked Villanova to win the national championship.
All right.
Well, you did.
I'm an idiot. What can I say?
Brian, did he not pick them to win the national championship?
I believe that's what we heard last week.
All right. When I look at this, the thing that stood out for me, especially after the game watching this, is Duke has their next coach, and he was on the UCF sideline, Brian.
I think that's one of the interesting things about Johnny Dawkins in particular, because when he left originally for Stanford, he was dubbed that. And his tenure at Stanford didn't go well, ended in him being fired, and then he was kind of off the radar, and now he's put UCF back on the map, and he's kind of in that mold again. I think he's certainly one of the front runners. I think you also have to look at Jeff Capel at Pitt, and even what Bobby Hurley's doing at Arizona State as well. But Dawkins has put himself back in the mix with this run that he's had at UCF.
Well, I think Dawkins, in the way he handles himself and his demeanor, is probably the best chance for Duke to continue after Coach K is gone. Because I'm serious. I watched Bobby Hurley coach in the first 4. I was not impressed.
I was going to say, could you imagine going from a figure like Coach K on the sidelines to just a madman with Bobby Hurley running up and down those sidelines for Duke?
Yeah, and I don't really get the idea that he's coaching. I just get the idea he's running up and down the sidelines.
Yeah, he certainly knows how to put on a performance.
Yeah, and I think he is a better coach than Chris Mullen, but Chris Mullen just kind of sits there and watches. So are we all in agreement Duke beats Virginia Tech?
Yep.
I say yes.
I think they will, but I think this game's a toss-up. I think Virginia Tech could easily win this game.
I think the thing that's fascinating here in this bracket, you've got 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you're now down to you've got all the great teams, and all the mid majors are gone pretty much for the most part. They had their 15 minutes of fame. You got some teams like Auburn we're going to get to them, I'm sure, somewhere down here that are all of a sudden gelling like no tomorrow. Minnesota or Michigan State's coming together. LSU's starting to play a lot better. They're getting their coaching situation. So each of these games are going to be great games now. And the thing I thought for the first weekend, and Brian, you and I kind of tweeted back and forth about this, is that while there were exciting games, they were all predictable. Everything that was supposed to happen happened, and that's not what March Madness is generally all about. So yeah, but I like Duke. In terms of Johnny Dawkins at Duke, you got to take the job. You got to do it. Alford tried it at UCLA. Everybody's tried it at IU. But to follow a legend, and that's a tough job to do. I mean, because you're never going to live up to Krzyzewski's records. Like, nobody's lived up to Knights. Nobody lived up to Wooden's. And, but you got to take the job. You can't not pass up if you get an opportunity to coach Duke.
I think the question is whether Duke would want him or
choice.
not, because I think Duke would probably go with Hurley first, but I like Dawkins. I like the way he handles himself.
Well, I like Dawkins too, yeah.
And I think I don't think it's so important that you get the next great coach in there, Brian, as it is that you get the next guy that can handle it, because there's going to be a ton of pressure there. And the thing about Dawkins is one of the reasons Coach K is still there, because if you remember, they were close to firing his ass until they made the tournament, in 84 or 85?
Yeah, I mean, there was really Coach K's first, I think, 4 or 5 years. There was a lot of pressure to fire him after the third or fourth year. I don't know. I'm getting my years.
I think it was after 83, and then 84 they made the tournament, and then 85 the Sweet 16, and in 86 they played for the national championship. And Johnny Dawkins and I think was it Tommy Amaker were that backcourt?
Yeah.
I don't know if Amaker. Yeah, Jay Billis was on that team.
Yes, it was.
Well.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
Mark Allery. Yeah.
But they essentially let him have that extra year because they didn't want to pay the price that it would cost to fire him. So they gave him that extra year, and, of course, Johnny Dawkins led them to the tournament and ended up being that first Final Four team that he had. So he certainly owes a lot of success to Johnny Dawkins, the fact that he's able to have the staying power. Whoever replaces him at Duke, I think from Duke's perspective, they're going to want it to be a Coach K disciple, somebody sort of in that family who played for him, just to keep the culture kind of the same. But if you're a coach kind of on the outside looking in, whether you played for Coach K or Duke or what have you, going back to Steve's point, you want to be the guy that follows the guy, that follows the legend.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of the added pressure that comes with
it's hard,
replacing a Coach K. I know Roy Williams did a great job at UNC after Dean Smith, but there, I believe, was 2 guys in between those two.
Roy Williamson had an established career at Kansas, didn't he? I mean, he was a successful coach at Kansas.
Yeah.
So he already had an established career. So that was just a transitional move for him, more so than Dawkins taking a big step up, or a Bobby Hurley, whichever one comes in to Duke. That's going to be the next tough job to fill, is going to be Duke. How much longer Coach K is going to coach, who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, he's got to be pushing 70, isn't he?
He's over 70.
He's 72, I believe.
Yeah.
Is he 72? Yeah.
But if he keeps getting guys that are first-round NBA picks, though, he'll be all right. Let's go and look.
I'll tell you how old I am. I got recruited by Duke by Bill Foster.
Yeah.
That's how old I am.
And then Duke found out about it, and Bill Foster got fired, which is indirectly how Mike Krzyzewski got his job with Steve Risley.
Get the job. So thank you, Mike. I should get front row seats in the Final Four from Mike Krzyzewski. I got him the job. Like, you tried to recruit this idiot Risley.
All right, let's drop down south of the East bracket, the bottom side.
Wait, we talked about Michigan State, LSU.
That's what we're getting ready to do.
Oh, okay.
That's the southern bracket, the East. I was just trying to confuse you. We had Maryland.
You did.
Maryland surprised me beating Belmont. They damn near beat LSU. LSU struggled with Yale, who I would like to bring up if you look at my predictions of scores. I picked that score perfectly correct. But LSU went on to play Michigan State. My question with Michigan State is they struggled with Bradley. Minnesota was missing Murphy. Once you take him out of their lineup, they're not even an NIT contender, I don't think. So when we look at LSU, Michigan State's favored by like 6-7 points right now. Am I crazy to think that you would have to be an idiot to give 6 or 7 points in this game? I think LSU is the better team even without their coach.
I agree. The problem with Michigan State is kind of what we've brought up several times this year, is the fact that with the injuries that they've suffered, they lack that sort of offensive explosiveness that they need to beat these kind of teams. You go back to the Bradley game, everything was hard for them offensively, scoring points. Everything was hard. It wasn't necessarily against Minnesota, as you mentioned. I think playing a Big Ten opponent helped. plus Minnesota being shorthanded certainly played a role in that. But Michigan State still turned it over a good deal in that game. Minnesota just couldn't hit anything on offense themselves. LSU, with their size and athleticism, Michigan State's not going to have those kind of advantages that they've had in some of these other games. And I think just top to bottom, LSU is the more talented team, save for Cassius Winston.
All right, Steve, what do you think?
Yeah,
LSU, Michigan State.
I think LSU is the better team, and they're still under a little bit of strife with their coaching situation, although it's getting better. They look strong. It's just hard. It seems to me that Izzo appears to be coaching his ass off this tournament. We've all, saw what happened in the games where he's getting on players and he's winning games with his coaching. Now, if he can carry that through LSU's talent, I think LSU's the more talented team. I think Michigan State obviously is the better coach team. We'll see. My theory of this whole thing has always been the farther you get in the tournament, the more important coaching becomes, because bench decisions, things that happen in the course of a game, transitions, things like that make a huge difference when it's one and done. Izzo's a master at that. So this is a great matchup because it's 2 and 3. They're evenly matched. LSU's playing great basketball. They've resurged over the situation, but I don't know. It's hard for me to bet against Izzo too, but I don't think he has the talent to overcome LSU's talent. But I'm going to go with Michigan State in this game.
Ooh, really?
I'll be wrong.
All right.
Yeah.
I don't think it matters because I think Duke beats either one of them. I think the difference, Duke LSU.
Yeah, right.
LSU may be one of the teams that have more athletic ability than Duke, but missing your coach and going up against Krzyzewski on one day's rest, 1 day to prepare, I would favor Duke to win that game. If it's Duke-Michigan State, I just think Duke's got too many athletes for him and just as good, if not a better coach. What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, I agree. Missing Will Wade hasn't mattered a ton to LSU so far. Maybe some of these close games would be, they would be more in favor of LSU by a couple more possessions. But in general, that hasn't impacted their on-court play too much. Where it would is should they get to a game against the Duke where they're not the athletically superior talent-wise team, and you need sort of that X's and O's. I think that is where you'll see that come into play. I don't necessarily think we will against Michigan State, given Michigan State's injuries, but yeah, I don't see a pathway for LSU to get to the Final Four.
All right.
Well, and can I comment on that before we go on? Because here's the deal with Wade. I don't think Wade was a genius coach necessarily. I mean, he's a good coach, obviously, but I think where the problem comes in here is delivery of information and a language that the players all of a sudden had to come into this tournament now, and they had to learn a new language from a new coach and a new way of information being delivered.
I mean, the coach was already on staff. I mean, when you're doing that, you're just switching the coach. He's just calling the same stuff. And I think Will is a hell of a basketball coach. I think it does affect him big time. And if he was there, I think LSU handles Maryland much easier. And I would actually give him a shot against Duke if he was there, Brian. I'd still pick Duke, but I would think that the opportunity to win is a lot bigger if he's there.
I agree. I agree with that, particularly against Duke. I think he may have made a difference in terms of a few possessions kind of down the stretch when LSU had leads against Yale and Maryland and were kind of losing the grip on those. I think he would have made a difference there. But really the identity of this LSU team is their offensive rebounding and just kind of strategy of getting the ball onto the rim and letting their athletes go after it and win the ball there. Plus, Tremont Waters doing what he does in the backcourt and also hitting the game winner against Maryland was great. But they're still playing that kind of strategy where it's just get the ball on the glass and let your big guys go get it, which they seem to be employing even more now. And that's not necessarily something that's a huge X and O thing when you have those kind of athletes.
Yeah, and I would think your chance against Duke here comes playing that way. Because playing that way, it's possible you could get Zion into foul trouble.
Oh, yeah.
And then things change. I still think Duke wins, but it'll be closer. All right, let's go to the South, which I like to call the Lawrence Central region, with Kyle Guy, the greatest player in Lawrence Central history, and the leading scorer.
Yes, he is.
And also,
He's basketball.
in the first 2 round games against Oklahoma and Gardner-Webb, I think Kyle in 2 games scored more than Risley did in 4 years at IU. I'm just kidding. Steve scored a lot more points than that. All right.
Kind of, maybe.
When we look at this, the thing that impressed me about Virginia is Gardner-Webb was up 28-14. And if there was any doubts with Virginia, I think we'd have seen it right there. They handled Oklahoma. I think, hands down, they still have to be the favorite to come out of this region. Brian?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think we saw them in that game against Gardner-Webb, the nerves and the monkey on their back, so to speak, of playing a 16 seed and then them getting down. I think they felt that pressure for a while until they were able to gather themselves and then find their rhythm in that second half specifically and win that game in a blowout fashion. And we saw against Oklahoma, they played a much more free game, much more relaxed game, much more Virginia game. So I think what we saw against Gardner-Webb was just sort of the playing tight in a game that they knew that they basically couldn't lose. I think they were dreading what could happen if they lost that game. Now that's in the past. We've seen them play like the Virginia team that they've played like really all year and really all last year too. The Oklahoma game was interesting to me because Oklahoma has a really good offense. They scored 95 points against Ole Miss in the first round game. Virginia limited them to 51, which is the lowest that I think that Oklahoma scored in the past couple of years. And they won that game comfortably at double digits. Kyle Guy, I think, only had 4 points in that game. I think he shot 2 of 15 from the field. Your leading scorer has his off game, and Virginia still dominated and won by double digits. That shows you how strong this Virginia team is this year, and I think a little bit more as to how much more equipped they are for March than they have been in years past. They have other guys who can beat you. They don't just rely on 1 or 2 guys to carry the offense.
All right, so the question here is Oregon, because Oregon, I think, is one of the most athletic, long teams in this. Is Virginia built to beat them? Because when I look at these 2 teams, the thing that stands out to me is Virginia always looks like they play under control. Oregon plays out of control. In the end, I think that's the difference here, and I think there'll be a 5 to 8 minute stretch where Oregon goes cold and Virginia finishes them off.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Oregon has the athleticism advantage, and we've seen Virginia struggle with elite athletes this year. And their loss to Duke and Florida State, that was kind of what got them in those games. But Oregon, in this 10-game winning streak they've gone on, has done so with their defense. And you're not going to out-defense Virginia. Oregon's offense is great when they're in transition. But when they're in the half court, they go through those long stretches. I think against UC Irvine last night, they went 9 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, stretching from the end of the first half to almost the under 12 timeout in the second half without scoring a point. They didn't get to the free throw line. They weren't able to do anything. They didn't score a point. You go through a stretch like that against Virginia, who's going to make you play a half-court game, you're not going to win that game. So I think Oregon has the athleticism, particularly Kenny Wooten, blocking some shots down the rim to keep things interesting for a little bit. But I don't see how they win that game. I think Virginia just kind of does their thing and beats them pretty handily.
All right, Steve, Virginia, Oregon. Do you give Oregon a shot here?
Yeah, they're dangerous. They're gelling. They're fearless. They've got nothing to lose here. They're a 12 seed coming in here. They're the lowest ranked seed team left in the tournament, I believe. Are they not?
Yeah.
I think they are, yeah. And so they're just playing now to survive and advance, not to put a pun on our show.
That is a great name, by the way. We ought to call a show that sometime.
Survive and advance, yeah. But Virginia, all of a sudden now, is reminding me a lot of how Gonzaga plays basketball. They're dispersed. They're well talented across the board, and they're well. I don't know if they're as well coached as Gonzaga, but they're well coached, and they have so many weapons. And Kyle Guy only scores 4 points, yet they still beat a strong Oklahoma team by 12 points. I think Virginia's got the easiest pathway until they're going to face Tennessee, or Purdue, whichever of those two. But I think Tennessee's going to win that game between those two, and we'll get to that game in a minute. But yeah, I think they've got the best pathway to the Final Four. Oregon, though, is just one of those teams. They're going to come out, and if Virginia is not hitting on six cylinders, meaning you got six players playing good basketball, because I think that's a very team-oriented basketball team, unlike, say, Duke, who's so reliant on Zion Williamson for the most part. They could pose a problem. But, yeah, I like Virginia in this game easily. I like Virginia in the Final Four. And I like Virginia in the championship game, actually, now.
I liked Virginia to win it all from the beginning. I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, it could be, yeah. Yeah,
and
no, it
you
could be.
picked Villanova to beat them in the Elite Eight.
All right, Mike.
All right.
Okay.
Let's
I hate making picks.
Let's go to the bottom, where Villanova, of course, got dispatched by Purdue. Iowa, great comeback against Tennessee. Tennessee had trouble against Colgate and Iowa, Brian. Mm-hmm. When I look at Purdue, Tennessee, I think a week or two ago I probably would have leaned towards Tennessee. But when I look at this now, I think Purdue is going to win this game.
It all depends on how Carson Edwards plays.
It always does.
When he plays at first-team All-Big Ten level, Purdue is capable of beating really good teams and teams like Tennessee. When he doesn't, they're not going to beat anybody. And he's played incredibly well this tournament. I think he scored 26 against Old Dominion and then went off for 42, I believe, against Villanova. He had come into the tournament on a bit of a cold spell. I think he had shot 25% or worse in 4 of their 7 games coming in. So he was kind of due for this kind of run, and he's played well. I'm interested to see if he's able to continue that kind of performance against Tennessee, given the kind of defenders Tennessee is going to put on him. But at the same time, Tennessee's struggles in this tournament so far, both in that comeback Iowa had and against Colgate, has been on the perimeter. The perimeter defense hasn't been very good in both games. Colgate and Iowa were able to get back into it because of their three-point shooting. Purdue's a good three-point shooting team, and if Carson Edwards gets hot, the pathway is certainly there for Purdue to win this game, and potentially, depending on how Edwards plays, they can potentially win it fairly comfortably.
Plus, this is Tennessee, and Tennessee tends to screw things up during March.
Here's my question, Brian. Who's the kid from Iowa? The 5, the shooting guard. Bohannon. Tennessee struggled to guard him. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you get the Purdue kid. What's his name?
Carson Edwards.
Carson Edwards. Yeah. If Carson Edwards goes wild, Tennessee's in trouble because they struggled to guard Bohannon. And if Carson Edwards has a good game, this game goes to Purdue. I think coaching here is pretty even. I don't see any big advantage in coaching for one way or another. And Purdue tends to have a meltdown right about this time every year, sadly.
So does Tennessee, though.
Yeah, I know. And if I don't root for IU, I root for Purdue. If IU's not playing, then Purdue's my next team to root for because they're a Indiana State team. But if Carson Edwards, I don't know if Tennessee can handle Carson Edwards because they couldn't handle Bohannon very well. I mean, Bohannon kept him in this game. So, right or wrong?
Here's the thing with Carson Edwards particularly. It's not necessarily that opponents take him out of games. It's he takes himself out of games a lot of times with just absolutely terrible shots.
Well, we saw that, Steve, IU and Purdue at Indiana when Indiana almost beat him, and he's like 3 for 25 or something, and he's launching stuff from half court.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, and really play a role in that.
That's where my fear is Painter a strong enough of a one-and-done coach to be able to control that and get him to take good shots? Because I tend to think Tennessee's a little bit better athletically than Purdue across the board, but I think Carson Edwards is the best player in this game. But what do you do? So I'm going to go with Purdue in this game. I'm going to say Edwards.
Damn, really? You just said you were taking Tennessee.
No, I'm going to go with Purdue. Carson Edwards is going to have a great
game.
You said
Tennessee, but all right. So Virginia against Purdue or Tennessee. I like Virginia either way, just because I think Virginia's got the better coach. I think they've got the better players, and I think Virginia defensively. I think Carson Edwards might go 2 for 78 against them.
He might, yeah. No, I think, like I said, I think Virginia of the number 1 seeds, they've got the easiest pathway into the Final Four.
I agree.
Going through these brackets, the easiest. If they get there, it's March Madness. Anything can happen, but I think they have the least path of resistance to get to Minneapolis.
All right, drop down and we will go to the West region where we've got Gonzaga versus Florida State. We've got Texas Tech, Michigan. I think this is very strong. I mean, the next two we talk about could be Final Fours. It really shocked me how badly Texas Tech beat Buffalo. It also surprised me how easily Michigan handled Florida. It surprised me how badly Florida State beat Murray State. When I look at these games, last year, Gonzaga gets upset by Florida State. I think the teams are similar to that. And this Florida State team, I think, is really underrated, Brian. I kind of like Florida State to possibly pull the upset here.
It's going to be a close game for sure. Both of them return the majority of the rosters from last year's team, which Florida State won that Sweet 16 matchup in the West region again last year. What they were able to do with their pressure and their length and athleticism was really bother Gonzaga's guards, particularly Josh Perkins, force them into a lot of turnovers and get them out of sync offensively. I think the first 5 or 10 minutes or so of that game will tell us who will win, because if Florida State's able to do that at an early stage, I think we'll see them beat Gonzaga again. At the same time, if Gonzaga is able to handle that at a level they weren't able to last year, Gonzaga has the better team and is more talented. Florida State's best chance to win is to kind of disrupt them in a similar fashion, and it's kind of all on Perkins and Gonzaga's guards in this game to handle that pressure and keep things rolling at the way Gonzaga is used to playing, as opposed to letting Florida State get to them.
And the thing that stands out to me here is the fact that Gonzaga has not had to play a team like this for 2 months. And that's what made me think maybe Florida State can jump them quick, because Gonzaga, the level of competition they played, has not been great. They beat Baylor and barely Dickinson, but I could say that's fairly not that impressive. So I think the lack of schedule here in their conference could be an issue.
Well, this is the time when there's a major step up. You got the one seed, so you played a 16 seed that wasn't very great, and you played a Baylor team that doesn't have the same kind of talent level as you do, and has been fairly hurt throughout most of the season. Now is when Gonzaga takes that step up, and if they do, I think we could see them win a couple more games, but now is kind of the defining moment for them.
All right, Steve, Gonzaga or Florida State?
I would just say this about the game. I think Florida State's a more athletic team, but I think Gonzaga's a team that's less likely to beat themselves. And I think Gonzaga's relentless, and they'll play 40 minutes of solid basketball and not make as many mistakes. Florida State, I've watched them play a couple times, 3 or 4 times, and they're talented, they're strong, but they're also capable of beating themselves. I'm going to go with Gonzaga in this game just because I think they're just going to wear them out, is what I think is going to happen here.
Gonzaga will wear Florida State out? I don't think that'll ever happen. Yeah. I think if Gonzaga wins, it's just because they can control go against the length. By wearing them out, I say they're just not going to make mistakes, and they're going to force the issue for Florida State to take chances that they wouldn't normally take. And when you just get on raw athleticism in these games, you tend to think you're Superman and do things you normally can't do because you got to win. But I just don't think Gonzaga is going to make a lot of mistakes here, and I think they'll just grind them into the ground, and they'll win by. It's going to be a close game. It's another great game. I mean. Yeah, all these games are. Let's go to the bottom part of the bracket where we've got Texas Tech and Michigan. Texas Tech is where if everything holds to form and they get to the Final Four, that's where I win my money in my brackets, Brian. And I think when I look at Texas Tech and Michigan, the thing that stands out to me is Jarrett Culver. I think Texas Tech and Michigan are both great defensive teams, but I think Texas Tech's just better offensively.
Culver's going to be the best player on the court. And over the past 12 games, Texas Tech's offense has turned from being something they won in spite of, a more complimentary offense, to a really good offense. Since they lost to Kansas at the beginning of February, I believe they're averaging right around 75 points per game, which is 10 points higher than what they were averaging per game beforehand. They found something that clicked after that game, and I know they had their loss to West Virginia, which wasn't pretty, but outside of that during the stretch, they've been playing at a really, really high level. Michigan has been able to get by despite a lack of really explosive, consistent offense so far because Montana wasn't going to beat them, and Florida is the kind of team that struggles offensively worse than Michigan does. That offensive advantage, I think, is why Texas Tech wins this game, and it wouldn't surprise me if they won it by double digits.
Steve, Texas Tech or Michigan?
I'm not betting against John Beilein. He's a great basketball coach. I think this is a game that, I'm not betting against Michigan on this game.
All right. I think Texas Tech has just as good a coach, and they have better players. And we've got, on my end, I would have Texas Tech against Florida State or Gonzaga. I'm taking Texas Tech in either one of those matchups, Steve. So you've got Michigan and Gonzaga. Who do you got?
Me, I've got Michigan Gonzaga.
I know. So who do you got coming out of that?
Oh, man. Good golly, Miss Molly. That's a tough call. I'm not betting on Michigan again. I got my butt chewed by you last year for betting on Michigan, so I'm going Gonzaga in this game.
And you turned that butt chewing into picking Villanova at the start of this tournament. So, all right.
Daylight, $1 short, buddy. That's my story.
All right, Brian. I got Texas Tech beating either one of the two in the top bracket. What do you think? You like Gonzaga or somebody else?
No, I like Gonzaga beating Florida State, but I like Texas Tech to get out of the region in that matchup against Gonzaga. I think Texas Tech, with that offense we talked about, is actually the most balanced team in this region. Gonzaga is fantastic offensively, but has some problems with turnovers and can get into some lapses defensively. Plus, going from Florida State to Texas Tech might be the toughest two-game stretch in terms of defenses the team will play in the entire tournament. And I think at some point that's going to wear on them in that game against Texas Tech. That would be an extremely close game, but I would take Texas Tech to win that and advance to the Final Four.
All right. Next up, we've got the Midwest region, which looks like a Final Four. We got North Carolina against Auburn. We got Houston against Kentucky. I will be sitting there in press row, too, because the Grueling Truth has credentials for that. I just figured I'd throw that in as, like sticking my finger to everybody else. But North Carolina, Auburn. This is a game that I think is tough to pick, Brian, because Auburn's playing as well as anybody in the country right now. And, North Carolina's not playing too bad either, as they showed against what I think is a solid Washington team. But they took Washington apart. Who do you like here, North Carolina or Auburn?
I think this is probably the worst matchup that Auburn could have gotten in the Sweet 16 of the teams that are left because of the fact that they beat teams by playing fast and shooting threes. But nobody plays faster or is as good at playing faster as North Carolina is. That's left in this group. I think it'll be an up-and-down game, and first to 100 might win. But you're not going to beat UNC with the talent that UNC has playing that style. Now, Auburn could get hot and make 23s, given the way that they've played so far, and that's certainly in the realm of possibility. But UNC has the athletes, I think, to be able to at least somewhat adequately defend Auburn the way Auburn's playing right now. And I don't know if the same can be said for Auburn, given their lack of interior presence.
All right, Steve, North Carolina, Auburn.
Roy Williams is the difference. I go back to this. I played in this thing, guys, and we won this thing. Coaching starts to make a difference here, and I think having Roy Williams on your bench, just making in-game decisions matters the more deeper you get into this thing. I would go with North Carolina. I think Auburn's a hot team, but I think they're going to run into a buzzsaw here with North Carolina. I just think Roy Williams will get his team under control. He'll not panic, and they'll get things done. And I got North Carolina winning this game for sure.
I've got North Carolina winning this game also. Like I said, the thing that's dangerous is as hot as Auburn is right now. But I still go back to the first-round game. They could have easily lost the New Mexico State game. And I'm not a huge Roy Williams fan, but I like him better than –
No, I'm not either. But
all right.
He's a good coach.
Now, this, I think, is maybe believe it or not, the closest matchup of all these regional semifinals. Houston and Kentucky, Brian. What do you think here?
I agree. I think they're pretty,
I agree, too.
I think they're pretty much mirror images of each other, honestly, in terms of just the style of play. The difference is going to be P.J. Washington for Kentucky. If he's healthy and plays, I think Kentucky wins this game by a narrow margin. If he doesn't, I don't know if they have the offense to beat Houston, in which case I think Houston would win by a little bit. P.J. Washington's injury is going to be the one to watch for in this game. But either way, I think it's going to be very, very close and come down to only a possession or two.
All right, Steve, Houston, Kentucky.
I like Houston. I think if there is one, and when you look at all the seedings and everything, and hopefully we'll talk about that before we hang up here, I think Houston is the closest thing left to a Cinderella team, only because all these other teams have been here before. I think Houston is this year's, if you can call any team a Cinderella team right now, because Houston's been strong all year long. I mean, they've been ranked high and done well all year long. But I just think Kentucky's not ready for Houston. I think Kelvin's done a good job with this program. I think they're playing. They have nothing to lose to play for. I like Houston in this game.
All right. I agree. I think Houston wins this game, even if P.J. Washington plays, because right now, Brian, if P.J. Washington plays, he hadn't played in 2 weeks by the time you get to next Friday. So the question then is, how rusty is he going to be? And I think even with P.J. Washington, this game is a complete toss-up either way. And I'll tell you, this may not be a popular opinion, but to coach a basketball game, I would take Kelvin Sampson over John Calipari. And that's not to say Calipari's that bad. I just think Kelvin Sampson is a really underrated coach that gets a bad rap for doing things that today would have been illegal.
Yeah.
So are you saying that are you saying that IU screwed up, Mike? Is what you're saying basically?
I think IU screwed up when they fired Bobby Knight. So go ahead with that. So.
Right. Go ahead, Brian. I'm sorry.
I think one thing to watch too will be the way Kentucky's guards play in this game, because Houston's got an experienced backcourt. I think their 4 top league scorers are all guards, and that's kind of who they rely on to carry them. And they've been pretty consistent all year long, even against top quality competition. Their ceiling probably isn't as high as Kentucky's guards in terms of their level of play. They've been playing at a consistently high level all season long. Kentucky's guards are, they're starting 3 freshmen essentially, Kelvin Johnson, Tyler Harrow, and Ashton Higgins in the backcourt. It's worked for them to get to this point, but this is going to be that trio's biggest test. I think they have the potential to play better than Houston's guards, but Houston's got those guards are all upperclassmen.
Yeah, and the thing is this. People forget this about Houston, Brian, but last year it took a last-second miracle shot for Michigan to beat Houston in the second round before they made that run to the Final Four.
Yeah, and so I think in a game that's going to come down to a few possessions, Kentucky, the play of Kentucky's guards late in that game, both offensively and defensively, and their ability to match or not match Houston's guards, I think is what could be what decides it.
Yeah. When I look at this,
I concur entirely. Yeah.
When we look at an Elite Eight matchup, if it's North Carolina Houston or North Carolina Kentucky, I think it's North Carolina Houston. And when I look at this, Brian, Houston's got a shot to win this. I don't think it's a huge shot. I think it's like a 40% chance in this game, but I think they've got a real shot to beat a North Carolina.
They have a shot. Whenever I look at this UNC team, I think they're going to win a national championship because I don't see any real holes in their team or in their roster. If you want to play slow half-court game, they have the size and the experience to do that. If you want to play fast, that's obviously what they love to do. You want to go small, they can put Nasir Little at center and go small special. If they want to go big, they can put him at the 5 with Luke May, Garrison Brooks. They have bigs they can throw inside and play big as well. They can beat you any way you want to. They can beat you inside. They shoot the 3 really well. Kobe White, in particular, has had a really good tournament so far, as has Luke May. I think UNC has too much and can beat you in too many ways. And even if Houston plays a really good game and keeps it close, I think UNC still has the edge.
All right. Now, I would take that with a grain of salt just because Brian picked Northeastern to beat Kansas. Steve, do you agree with me? I would say this.
Picks as I've made, Mike, you're going to ask my opinion. I picked Villanova to win it all. Are you kidding me? You're going to ask me that question? Really? Seriously?
My question is this. I know North Carolina's won like 9 out of the last 10 in the regular season. But the thing I do remember is there was a time in this season where we were worried about how consistent they were. That's kind of went away. Houston's a consistent team. I just think either way, either one of these teams is a tough out for anybody to knock out. And that's why I think both teams are better than Kentucky, and that's why I think Houston will beat Kentucky, is just the consistency. You don't get too many games where they play poorly. And that being said,
totally agree.
That means
totally
Houston,
agree.
North Carolina goes down to the wire probably in a close game. In a close game, I just like the experience Houston has here. I think I would probably, if I had to bet it, I would bet North Carolina. But I still think this is going to be a single-digit game that's going to go down to the final couple minutes.
Well, that's the thing. UNC has the experience as well. I mean, Kobe White's is the only starter who's a underclassman.
I know. That's what I'm saying. I think these teams are really evenly matched. I think Carolina has a little bit more athletic ability. But I think that Houston, the thing that strikes me here is just the loss at the buzzer to Michigan. Watching Michigan go to the Final Four, then they come back and win, 30 games this year. I just think there may be a little bit more purpose there.
That's fair.
Well, as long as that's fair. All right, Steve, I'm sure you got some questions about things that happened from Thursday or from last Tuesday till Sunday.
Well, here's my question for Brian. I know Brian, you're short on time. I know you had some time frames you had to work within, but did the net rankings get it right? Because we have 1, 4, 3, and 2, 1, 4, 3, and 2. We have 1, 12, 3, and 2, and we have 1, 5, 3, and 2. Are the net rankings the way to go now? Did they get this right? Because we were all kind of pissing and moaning about it.
Yeah, because it's crap. This whole thing is crap. I mean, you've got teams that are undefeated. They've got the top teams seeded correctly. But Liberty, I don't think when you looked at their body of work should have been at 12. I mean, I think Mississippi State got screwed on that deal. But I don't think Liberty should have been at 12. When I look at this, I don't think Belmont should have been an 11. I think Belmont should have been seated at an 8 or a 9. I think that's a lot better team than that. I think the Yale team was better than a 14. And then we saw teams that weren't as good as their seeds, and those were usually teams like Syracuse. I mean, I don't think Syracuse should have been an 8 seed. I don't think Ole Miss or Oklahoma should have been an 8 or a 9. So overall, you're getting the top-seeded teams. But it's a lot easier to do when they underseed other teams. You know, a team like Liberty, if you put them at an 8 seed and they're playing a 9 seed, you know, maybe they can play 2 games in a row.
All right, but I go back to my original question. We basically have the top 4 seeds of how they picked them, with the exception of Oregon, who's making a run.
Auburn.
We basically, in Auburn, Auburn's a 5 seed, so really you got to throw them in that boat. With, you know, they could have gone. They kind of got this right. And when's the last time we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 12, 3, 4, 3, 2? When's the last time we had all 4 number 1 seeds going into the Sweet 16?
This is the second time since the tournament expanded in '85 where we've had each of the top 3 seeds in each region advance to the Sweet 16.
When was the first time?
2009.
I don't remember that. If you'd have said 1990, I could have remembered that.
I think 09 was the only year there's been all 4 number 1 seeds in the Final Four. And that may have been 2000. Actually, I think that may have been 2008. But it's the second time that's happened. So in that sense, yeah, the committee got it right with these top teams. At the same time, I would take that with a grain of salt because we've talked about this numerous times this year, the fact that there was a very clear-cut top tier of teams in the country that were head and shoulders above everybody else. That's why we saw really the top 10, 11 every week in the AP poll kind of recycle through the same teams, where everybody 11 through 25 essentially based on your schedule that week and if you played a decent team or not. There was so much turnover at the bottom part of the rankings because they didn't have those kind of caliber teams to challenge the top 10, 11, however many teams in the country. So the committee got it right, but I will say I think it was easier for them to get it right this year because of how all of these teams played during the regular season.
Okay, here's my question. Other than Oregon, who's a 12 seed, and you've got Auburn, who's a 5 seed, is there a Cinderella in this dance anymore? Or are we just all playing favorites now?
No, I mean, Oregon would have to be considered the Cinderella because they're below.
But they're not going to get past UVA.
Right, but I mean that's the only team you can look at. Now, if Auburn were to knock off UNC, I think you look at Auburn potentially as Cinderella because they're not a traditional basketball power. Plus, they cruise through the SEC tournament. I think that would be, if you're looking to find a Cinderella, that would be where you would find it. But you can't look at any of these top 4 teams in any region and call them the Cinderella.
No, definitely not. In my opinion,
UCF was your last chance at one.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Agreed, Mike. Great call. And had that ball gone in, there's your Cinderella team. And then you've got March Madness.
Yeah, but the one thing I will give you is this. We definitely knew who the top teams were, but most of these, 13, 14, 15 seeds now are at least in the game for 30 minutes, where that's not what we saw before. So I think things depth-wise are more competitive than what they were. And, I mean, Kentucky got really lucky that we're not talking about Wofford as being the Cinderella here.
Yeah, well, their perimeter defense won them that game.
Well, I think the officials helped, too, a little bit.
Yeah, in what game does Kentucky not get a little bit of an edge there?
I know. Spoken like a true ACC fan, too.
Oh, no, trust me. I know the conversations around the Kyle Whistle's Duke gets, so...
Oh, yeah, so do I. So,
and we have got to do a show on this damn instant replay officiating. I mean, it should not take 8 minutes to replay an out of bounds.
What are you talking about? Now, because if you're talking about whether it hit the rim or not hit the rim, I could see why that took 8 minutes, because every angle you looked at, it looked like something different happened.
It looked different, right. Well,
but after about 2 minutes, you got to realize that, this is inconclusive.
Yeah, and if it's inconclusive, you can't overturn it, so let it go.
Yeah,
and
I don't think the ball hit the rim, but I'm still not sure completely.
Right, yeah, so you don't overturn it.
Because there's that one angle where it looks like it skims right back where the rim connects, and in the other 2 angles, it didn't look like it did. So,
I just think it takes away from the game because you're sitting there and you're trying to get to Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. And you got to sit there and watch 6 seconds of play.
Nobody's trying to do that, Steve, but you.
8 minutes. Oh, I'm trying to. I'm trying to.
Just you.
Just me. But you're going into 8 minutes of review. It's like, okay, just look at it from one angle, make the call, and move on. If it's inconclusive, it's inconclusive. So I think instant replay really is starting to become a burden in the momentum and spontaneity of the end of a basketball game and taking away some of the madness of the game. Brian, is that fair?
I think it's fair to an extent. I think I understand why the GQCF game, that call took a while, because in a game of that spot, or in that spot in a game of that magnitude, you want to get the call right. I would be in favor of instituting some sort of time limit to where, if a review goes to that time, it's automatically ruled inconclusive, because let's say it takes 2 minutes at a review and you still haven't figured it out, it means it's inconclusive.
But those are calls that we have to get right.
Yeah, if it's conclusive, it's pretty easy to tell in a replay after 1 or 2, maybe 3 replays at the very most. You don't necessarily need to see the same replay 20 times over an 8-minute span to get a call.
Yeah, because once you see it from one angle and it looks like one thing, and you see it from the other angle and it looks like the other thing, then you should immediately say this is inconclusive.
Right. So, Mike, let me ask you a question. Would it be fair, given the fact that the NCAA is a nonprofit organization and they don't make any money, that they just employ their own camera and that becomes the official replay camera, and they get one angle at it, and they have one camera designated in the stadium, and that becomes the official replay camera, and we just look at that one angle.
How can you just look at one angle? Because from one angle it can look like one thing, and from the other angle it looks like something else, and then it's inconclusive.
Well, I know. Then you get 8 minutes of review on whether the ball hit the rim or not.
I'll tell you what. With these two teams, if you saw the way this loss affected UCF, if that call only gets one angle, if it only gets one angle and that angle shows the ball didn't hit, you could change who wins this game. and you don't want to do that.
That's
I want the call done right. I'll wait 8 minutes. I don't care.
Okay.
I just want the call right because these kids spend way too much time working for this goal from the time they're born until the time they're 22 and maybe they're a senior, and I don't want a bad call by an official deciding anything.
Yeah.
fair. I mean, yeah, I just asked the question. I mean, I wasn't trying to make a decision. I just asked the question if you shouldn't just limit it to, okay, I think the time limit, it's tedious to sit there for 8 minutes and, and they can't come to a decision on it.
Really? You
I
sit
think
there
it
and you
takes
watch
away-
Desperate Real Housewives of Beverly Hills for a half an hour, and you think 8 minutes of watching a replay is tedious?
Yeah.
What if we just had officials with big boobs, and you can sit there and look at that? Because, I mean, the call needs to be right.
There you go. All right. fair assessment.
Actually, when you
No
look
problem.
at it that way, that probably wouldn't be a bad idea.
There you go.
Brian, you're for that, aren't you?
Wouldn't be opposed.
Okay, he wouldn't be opposed, so I'll take that as a yes. He's good with it. Anything else,
There you go.
Steve?
I'm done.
All right.
We're back on. We're back on for the Final Four show Monday. Next Monday.
Yeah, next
Oh, yeah.
Monday, Brian. And
Oh, yeah.
are you going to the Final Four, Brian?
Don't have plans to right now. But we'll see. It's looking like a no.
All right. So that Friday we'll do a Final Four special also. And we're going to have a couple
Right.
of guys that won national champions on, hopefully, at that point. So if you want, you can be a guest on that show.
Sounds great.
All right, guys.
I'm bringing some other guys on. Yeah, we're bringing some other guys on who won other national championships for other teams, and we're going to have some fun with it. So, Brian, we'd love to have you on Friday if you can be on Friday.
That'd be great.
The only thing I do know is this: there'll be nobody that ever won a national championship for Purdue because they've never won one. All right.
No, they did it. They did in girls basketball.
Nobody
They have a
cares.
national
Oh,
championship in girls
geez,
basketball.
girls
Mike,
basketball. Number
don't go
one.
there. Don't go there.
Really? You're going
Don't
to tell
go
me
there.
not to go there, and you're the one that just called it girls basketball?
Well, what do you call it? Women's national
Women's
championship.
basketball,
Okay, I'm
but since they're women when they're above the age of 18. Jeez. Now if you try to run for president, they're going to replay this, and somebody's going to say, see, he's a misogynist. Plus, you colluded with Russia to watch the NCAA women's tournament.
He got exonerated from that. He did not.
No, I'm
collude
talking
with
about
Russia.
you. But,
Oh, okay.
yeah. All right. And, yeah, nobody cares who won the NCAA women's
Exactly.
championship. Thank you. I can't believe you went there with me. But I would like to say the Indiana Hoosiers did make it to the second round of the NCAA women's tournament. They were then unmercifully
Thrilled.
beaten by Oregon.
Thrilled.
So,
Yeah.
But hey, Brian, we didn't even bring up the most important of the two tournaments, and that's the NIT. You think IU makes it to the Final Four and beats Wichita State?
No.
Well, me neither.
Wichita State's playing well the past couple months, and I think it means a little
Yeah.
bit more to them right now.
Yeah,
Me
I
neither.
agree.
I don't think they do either. I think
Yeah.
this is, yeah. I think we're all in agreement on that one. I think Indiana's done.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
All right.
Probably.
I would like to bring up the fact that our NIT post-game show from Saturday had like over 3,000 listens, Steve.
You know why? Because we didn't have Colin on. That's why.
Colin was on, Steve.
Oh, was he on?
Yeah.
Were you on?
Yeah, I was on too. So was Cole.
Okay. Never mind.
All right. All right, guys. You
Maybe
can
I
follow.
wasn't on. Was I on? Was I on the show?
Yeah, you were on, Steve.
Okay.
Okay. You see what I deal with now, don't you, Brian?
I gotcha.
Yeah, it's amazing. All right, guys. You can follow Brian at Fansided and Busting Brackets. Brian, you want to tell them where they can follow you at on Twitter? Was it at BRalph?
Yeah,
33.
BRalph 30. Yeah, BRalph 33, BRAUF 33, and I'll work online at bustingbrackets.com.
All right, and you can follow Steve Risley. If you go to L.A., you'll see him wandering through the streets with a dog named Shithead and a bathrobe on. Just follow him there. Or you can follow him at Risley, at SRisley34, because I know Steve likes the movie The Jerk. All right, Tomorrow, we will be on with Fred Mitchell, who is the author of The History of Loyola Basketball. He'll be on to talk about Jerry Harkness' 63 team, all the way up to the Final Four run that Porter Moser ran last year with his team. So make sure you check us out with Fred Mitchell tomorrow. Also, Steve, we have a request for the American Cornhole Organization to have their president on to tell us how they are becoming a billion-dollar thriving business. But that'll be probably after the NCAA tournament. But I know Steve loves cornholing, don't you, Steve?
I have a cornhole set up on my
ever since he moved to California. But
we play cornhole every day.
Do you, Steve? All right.
It's a great game. Are you kidding me? What are you knocking cornhole for?
Oh, I'd tear your ass up at cornhole. I was the 7th-ranked cornhole player in the world in 2006. That's a true story, too. It really is. And I'll put my little certificate up, too, and I'll post it on Twitter. All right, guys, we're going to wrap the show up. We will be back tomorrow with Fred Mitchell, Loyola Basketball. I want to thank Brian for coming on. Bobby Sheridan overslept and just woke up, so you can hear Bobby's on this day when we do the Sheridan Report at 2 o'clock. So that screwed that up because I was going to give Steve a history lesson on Don Donaher and the Dayton Flyers today. But
I was looking forward to that, but I guess I'm not invited, so I guess I'll stay, just go watch Young and the Restless.
We could call you in for it. I don't care.
It's up to you guys. It's your guys' show.
If you're going to bitch and whine and cry, yeah, we'll bring you on. Don't worry about it. Brian, do you want to come on and talk about the 1967 Dayton Flyers also?
I think
he's got things to do.
Oh, good. I wasn't going to let you on anyways because that's too complicated to call 2 people in a 1-minute span for me. All right, guys, we're going to wrap the show up. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at Grueling Truth. You can follow us also at Survive the Magic. Go to Facebook, like our page. So, I almost forgot a very important part. Also, mybookie.ag. Up to 50% cash bonus, up to $1,000. Make sure you go to gruelingtruth.net, click the banner at the top of the page for mybookie.ag. You can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher. Wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find the Grueling Truth. So, for Brian Rauf.
Can I say one thing?
What?
Baseball season starts Thursday. MyBookie AG. We have Bobby Sheridan, who is a genius at picking baseball. If you want to get involved, you should listen to the Sheridan Report because Bobby is allegedly a genius at picking baseball games. That's his forte. And go to MyBookie AG, put some money in the account, and listen to Bobby. I guarantee you're going to make some money.
All right, guys. So, once again, for Steve Risley, Brian Rauf, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.